So the fitness and feelings... I'll be fine after this. So the Fitness, Feelings and Feminism podcast is back up and running, and now you can actually see my beautiful face along with my soothing voice as we will be on YouTube and getting filmed. And today, to get it back with a bang, I have got my lovely big cousin on with me. When we were talking about what to do for her introduction, I realised that I have been mistitling what she does.
I think you still just know what my job was when I was 18 and you've never moved on.
I've just known it's like with money, stuff that I'd never want to do. So this is Chloe. If you would like to tell me then, for once and for all, what do you do for a living?
I'm going to test you on this.
Okay.
So I started my career at the Big Four in accounting, realised that was a little bit dull and moved on to some more exciting things. So did that for a few years, went and did mergers and acquisitions. So I was helping business owners sell up, get their money out of their businesses. I then moved into an online retailer and did some work in-house for a year. And I have now finally landed again back at the Big Four, but this time helping really small early stage businesses. So we are venture capital advisory. So it means when people are trying to grow their businesses and need some money in to help them do that, our kind of team goes out, finds the investors, helps project manage the deals, etc. And my job with that team is purely looking after the investors. So I basically get paid to go out for coffee and have a nice time and be friends with all the investors.
So when you say that like you work with investors and stuff, is your job then, say if I came to you and I said like, I've got a business, I need some money, like some backing behind me, can you find me some investors? So you like that middleman of...
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
I'm like the middle person. So whether it's, you know, these big banks that have got money that they're putting into early stages, if it's just wealthy individuals who've kind of made their money and want to give back, my job's to kind of know who those people are, know what they're interested in, and then, help those early stage businesses get the money.
So I'm not sure whether you'd be allowed to answer this, and it's fine if you can't. What's the biggest amount of money you've had to deal with?
Well, so this is much earlier stage than what I used to do. So here it's probably, we do fundraisers from like £500,000 all the way up to kind of 10, 15 million. Yeah,
pennies.
Really immaterial. When I was in the M&A team, I think the biggest transaction I did was 300 million. And that was crazy actually, because you get to the point where when you're in the really final stages and you have to do like all these Excel spreadsheets and tell everyone where the money's going. We lost 10 grand in a spreadsheet somewhere. And
so how can you just lose 10 grand in a spreadsheet?
It's in the roundings. It's so immaterial on that big a deal that we were just like, we've lost 10 grand. Who should we give it to? This is making me sound like I'm really incompetent at my job.
10 grand, basically a fiver.
We found the 10 grand. It didn't actually go missing.
Right, okay.
Just an Excel issue.
So big money. What's it like working with that kind of pressure then? Because obviously I struggle doing my own accounts, let alone being like, oh, by the way, Chloe, here's 300 million. Don't mess up.
I think it all becomes quite relative quite quickly. Like when you are trained to do that, then you kind of do get used to it quite quickly.
So you don't see it as I've got 300 million.
Yeah. So even when I was in audit, for example, which is the slightly duller side of accounting, straight away you're working on businesses that turn over like hundreds of millions of pounds. So I would actually find it impossible to come to you and do your accounts because I just like that. I'm not trained to build that up. It's really weird.
That is mad.
And also, I'm not in charge of the 300 million. I'm not allowed to touch the money, sadly. All the lawyers handle that. We're not to be trusted.
So how did you decide that it was this kind of, because obviously you said auditing was dull. How do you kind of move about in accounting? Like, how did you know what was for you and what wasn't for you?
So I think I was really lucky that to start with, I kind of fell into what we call the Big Four, which is...
I was going to ask you, what is the Big Four?
So the Big Four, there's basically 4 firms that dominate the UK accounting market. So if you're like a FTSE 100 company, you will be audited by PwC, EY, KPMG. What's the other one called? Deloitte.
It slipped my mind.
Deloitte. So you'll be audited by one of them. One of them will do your tax. One of them, if you're going to raise more money, you'll get them in. Like they just dominate. And I was really lucky that I just kind of fell into it. I didn't have like my heart set on going into it.
Yeah.
But like the audit, I'm saying was dull. But that's how I got my degree, my professional qualification, years of work experience, really good grounding. And I think the thing is when you work in a company that's that big, there's got so many different things going on.
Yeah.
That I was just really lucky that I had friends kind of in the years above me who went off and explored different things, and then I could kind of tap into them and see what sounded interesting. So yeah, that's how I ended up going down to the deals route, really.
Your job is amazing. It would be my worst. Like, even though we're cousins and we get on so well, we couldn't be more chalk and cheese with like our lives.
Probably goes all the way back to us being quite little, though.
Yeah. My memories of Chloe growing up was, I don't want to use the word bully because that sounds harsh, but it was very much, I remember having like this like walk-in wardrobe, which makes my house sound massive. It wasn't.
That was a fab little wardrobe.
It was so random. I lived in like the literally tiniest of box rooms.
The wardrobe was probably like half the size.
I know. Literally, I probably should have had my bed in the walk-in wardrobe, and you'd make me get all my teddies out, demand me to play school, but then I wasn't actually allowed to play. I just had to watch you be the teacher.
You were one of the children, weren't you?
I was one of the children. Yeah. So you've always been a bit of a boss bitch, should we say. What was I going to ask you then? I was going to say about working with... I've been reading a book recently, basically, which is called Renaissance Souls. That's not a plug. I've not finished the book yet. And it talks about having... that sometimes we're kind of driven to go down one path. So obviously to me, if you said you worked in accounting, I thought naively accounting is just all one route. But it talks about how, like, when you said then about you had friends and you've seen different things that they do, that it's better to be more equipped in everything than like they kind of talk negatively, don't they, about you don't want to be a jack of all trades and a master of none.
Yeah.
Would you say that in accounting it definitely benefits you to have an idea of all the different aspects?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, some people will go into one certain area and love it and excel at it, and they know that's what they want to do. But I think even if it's just an awareness of everything that goes on elsewhere, even if you decide you don't want to go down that route yourself, I think knowing what else is happening is really important. And I think I wouldn't be where I am now in my career if I hadn't gone out and tried different things. I've tried industry, I've tried deals, I've tried different things within deals. So I think it is all really valuable experience.
Can you see yourself staying in this area?
I think so, definitely for the moment. I mean, getting to know investors in my day job now, like I think what they do is really interesting. Like maybe I'd like to go and try that one day. But yeah, happy where I am for now.
So I've asked you this before, and I feel like I know the answer. Because you work with investors, is there a lot of rules and stuff around, like, you could have in front of you like a business that is going to do amazing, but are you not allowed to invest your own money into it, or can you?
I could if I had
the money that it needs to invest.
Yeah, it depends on where you are, because obviously as part of a big four company, there's loads and loads of rules about what you can and can't do. If I was in a different company, I probably could. But yeah, I think the investments range so massively. So even when I'm talking about, we might be raising £500,000 for someone, sometimes that can be made up of checks that are, 10k. And obviously that's still a huge amount of money. But actually, if you were to think in, 20, 30 years time, when you've got yourself established and you've kind of done your career, like, people do it as angel investments. And
so what's an angel investment?
So angel investment is an individual, so wealthy individual investing their own money, maybe not going in to advise the business. So they're not saying, I want a role on the board, I don't want to be part of the management team. They're just literally there in the background as a bit of an angel saviour, saying, here's 10k to go off and deliver your business plan.
I could do with a few angel investors. So we've spoke about where you are now, but obviously we've had like private chats and stuff about things you've faced going into what you're doing. Obviously it's quite a male dominated industry. How have you what challenges have you faced in that case then?
I think, interestingly, a lot of those challenges haven't come from the teams that I've worked with internally. So I've always found, especially at the start of my career and where I am now, that the teams are so supportive. I've never had that kind of internal challenge. It's actually a lot of the time it's been external. It's been from clients and, you know, people that I'm meeting. I mean, just yesterday, actually, I was on a call with someone and we were doing the introductions. I was with like our top partner. So obviously he went first, said who he was. And then when it came to me and I said, I'm the head of, you know, this is my role. I did 10 years here. He literally like peered into the camera and was like, 10 years? And I was like, yeah. And he was like, you don't look old enough to have 10 years experience. And I was like, well.
Do you find you get more, I can't think of a better word, so I'm just going to say like discrimination, but I don't mean a word as strong as that, but possibly could, for more your age or
Yeah.
more your age?
I think it's a bit of both. Because I think like we've got the Isherwood genes where we've got small, round, chubby cheeks.
I beg your pardon.
Ellie, we've got fantastic genes. But I think like people often do assume I'm a lot younger than I am.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's said like in such a nice way. They're like, oh wow, like I wouldn't have said you were that young. So yeah, the age thing's interesting. I mean, because I started my career at 18 as well. The kind of traditional way that you come into this is you do your degree and then you join one of these big companies. So by the time I was kind of 19, 20 and had a few years work experience, I was then in charge of the people that were coming in fresh from uni. Right. And there were one or two characters that I think didn't feel like they should be reporting into someone 2 years younger than them and whatever. But yeah, I think, I mean, there's a story I've told you before about being on a call with a client, and it was back in the old days when, you know, you didn't have Teams and stuff. It was literally, you got your phone, you dialed in, no one could see you.
Oh, so no one could see?
No one could see. Okay. It was all blind. It was literally just voices. And at the start of the call, I kind of was like, oh, sorry, I'm working from home today. I think I had like a doctor's appointment or something. And it was really unusual back then. Like it was normally 9 to 5 in the office. So we got started with the call, carrying on. And then on the line, you could hear like a baby like fussing and crying, and we were all just like carrying on. And then eventually one of the clients, who was quite an old guy, interrupted the call and was like, sorry, everyone, Chloe, do you want to just drop off the call and go and fix that? Like go and fix that. I can't remember what he said, but it was basically like, Chloe, get off the call, go and sort your kid out. And I was like, sorry, that's not my line.
Yeah.
And then it was somebody else on his side of the table who was like, oh, sorry, that's me. Like, I'll drop off now. Like, sorry, my wife's ill. I'm looking after the baby at home. And as soon as he said that, the guy was like, oh, no worries.
Yeah, because didn't he say to him, oh, you don't need to drop off, like,
don't
worry about it. But when it
was me, it was like,
you're like, get off this call.
Go and look after your baby. That's what you should be doing.
You should be working.
Yeah, so it's funny. I think that is dying out more and more. I mean, that was 10 years ago.
Have you seen the difference then in like, because obviously you've still got the age comments because we're so youthful looking. But do you think that, because obviously the age stuff might start to stop the older that
when
you get.
Wrinkly,
when you get wrinkly, yeah.
Do you know what is interesting?
Less desirable.
No. So I really noticed, like when I got engaged and now that I'm married, that almost commands more respect in a really weird way. Yeah, because I think that kind of gives you a bit of credit that you're older, you know, you're married. And one of my friends who worked with me, she had a couple of kids, and she used to say the same, that if she was on a call and then had to be like, oh, sorry, like I've got to drop off, I've got the nursery run to do, or whatever it might be, or that she just mentioned her kids in passing, she said she felt like she instantly got more respect almost. Of,
why do you think that is?
This is a grown-up woman.
Yeah.
She does actually maybe know what she's doing because she's married and she's had kids, and
yeah,
it is weird, but I think it gives you that age validation. And I'm sure it's all like super, super unconscious, but it is like a weird thing that me and a few of my friends have noticed.
Yeah. I think a lot of stuff is unconscious because I've noticed myself that, like I work at a CrossFit gym, obviously, as people know, and all the members are fantastic. But I can guarantee there's been times where people will, if they're not really good on social media or they just want to pop in and see what the gym's about, I could literally be stood with my CrossFit Witness t-shirt on by the whiteboard, writing on the whiteboard, and someone could a fella could be mid-workout and they'll go. I remember one time it was my friend Lee, and he was literally dripping with sweat. He was doing wall balls like mid-reps, and some fella literally came and tapped him on the shoulder. And I like watched him walk the whole way through, and I
Right
was like,
past
"What's
you.
he doing?" And he was like, "Could you just tell me a bit about memberships, please, mate?" And he was like, "Go and ask her over
The girl
there."
in the
yeah,
cross shirt, t-shirt.
literally. So I do get that, and but it's this fella hasn't walked into the gym and been like, "I hate women. I will not speak. A woman couldn't work here." It's just that unconscious kind of thing, isn't it? Have you kind of, because I remember you telling me a story, obviously I don't know if you can talk about that one, about where you've been in meetings before and you've kind of been leading the meeting almost, but you've been asked to go and get everyone.
Yeah, I've been asked to get the coffees or the teas as the person supposedly leading the meeting. It's been assumed that I'm there as the note taker, or I'm the PA or whatever it might be. It's quite funny actually sometimes, because it is sometimes so unconscious that there's been times where we've sat down kind of our side of the table, clients sat down on theirs, and the body language and pointing and eye contact is all at the man over here. And then when we do the introductions and they realise that he's like the analyst or super junior, and I introduce myself as like the person leading the project, you just see the body language go, "Oh, you're there, you're in the room."
And it's hard, isn't it? Because I've had these conversations before where, although they're unconscious and harmless, it doesn't mean that it's not extremely irritating when it does happen. Not as much mine, because it's very rare that you'd think really I'm in quite and maybe not as much now, because I'd say the game's changed a bit, but people might assume that it's a more male-dominated industry, but I actually wouldn't say the fitness industry is as male-dominated. I don't know the actual statistics on that, but I feel like I know a lot more female PTs now. When I teach a class, it can be like a 50-50 split. Sometimes there'll be more women. Obviously, I run female-only boot camps. So I feel like it's assumed that I would face a lot of it in my work, but I don't know if it's just because I'm in a good environment.
I think that does account for a lot. Like, if I was to look at my teams, like, they're all so supportive. I mean, in those instances where I was asked to go and get the tea and coffee, the partner who was with me was like, "Actually, I'll get them. Let me, I'll let Chloe tell you about this, this, and this." And, he didn't have to do that as the partner, but I think there's a lot to be said for the teams that you work in.
Definitely, because, and sometimes as well, it just, like, I remember probably about 10 years ago, I was an ops manager at a leisure centre, and I'd only just started out, but I'd worked in that specific leisure centre from when I was like 17 to about 21, 22, maybe even 23 actually. I can never, since COVID, everything just blends into like pre-COVID, post-COVID. And I was the ops manager, and there was a lifeguard, and he was a man, so we're in different uniforms already, so you haven't got the excuse of not knowing, because his t-shirt literally says lifeguard, mine literally says operations manager. And I'd just started my shift, and I can't remember what it was for. I don't know if it was like something wrong with the plant room, so the lifeguard wouldn't have even been able to sort that problem out because he doesn't have keys. He wouldn't know what he was doing. And he literally said to me, "I'd just find it easier if I could speak to him." And I remember saying, "Well, you're not going to get anywhere because he's just let you in." All this poor lad had done, and because he felt a bit uncomfortable as well, like he didn't really know what to do with himself, he just signed this fella in. Like, he just signed him in, like, because you used to have to log everybody coming in, everybody coming out. He just signed him in, probably got a bit of chit-chat, and then I come in and was like, "Right, how can I help you?" I was literally, my jaw hit the floor, because it's like, I'd just find it easier if I could speak to him. I remember being like, I think I actually was quite stirred in that sense, and I'm not usually, I've spoke to you about this, that I'd like to be more firm. And I actually said, "Well, tough shit," like, more or less, you're speaking to me. And he was all right after that, really, because it was like a simple thing. But I'd say, working in the gym that I work at now, I don't know if it's just like how CrossFit is very equal, as in, I can't even describe how or why it is, but it just feels like a level playing field. So since I've worked there, I haven't. But when I've worked at like leisure centres more so, I definitely have.
Yeah. I think it's quite like a societal thing as well. Like, if I think about the times that I've encountered it, it does tend to be older generations.
Yeah.
Sadly.
What would you say about that then? Because obviously this isn't me agreeing with this argument, but people have the argument of, well, it's just like, there's so many times where I've gone home and I've said like, oh, this happened and blah blah. It's not fair, and it's just a generational thing. But like I said, similar to when things were unconscious, even though it's a generational thing, it doesn't make it any less annoying.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And, you know, it's the sweeping statement to say it's the old people that are doing it, because equally, I've come across some really lovely, supportive people of older generations.
Yeah.
There was one client in particular who always really championed me and the other girl on the team. And he had a daughter who was like my age and was doing a similar job. And so I think he kind of knew what she was going through and wanted to make sure he wasn't inflicting that on people, kind of thing.
I think it comes a lot too. You can kind of be, if you don't realise what privilege you have, you can become blind.
The privilege thing it's really tricky to try and explain that to some people. So it was International Women's Day last month, and one of the big kind of like discussion points in my industry at the minute is about investment into female founders, because if you look at where money in the UK is going to, I think it's improved now. I think we're now at 3%, but when this first report was done last year or the year before, female founders were getting 1% of investment in the UK. So it's a huge problem. And
so sorry to interrupt. Does that mean that females in business or whatever it is that they're doing, when they're looking for investments, they're not getting them as much, right? Okay.
Yeah. So they're just, although they account for, I haven't got the figures, somewhere between 25 and 50% of businesses, they're only getting 1% of the funding. So for International Women's Day, as a company, we decided to put something out about talking about, as investors and as people in this community, like what can we be doing to help solve this issue? And one of the partners put it out on LinkedIn and got so many men in her inbox saying, why are you only talking about this for females? Like, you know, I'm trying to raise money and it's really hard. And trying to articulate to them that, yes, it is hard, because it's a really, really hard thing to do. No matter who you are, raising money for your business is one of the hardest things you'll probably do as a business owner. But you being male isn't making that any harder.
Yeah.
And that's what privilege is. And I think
people can get very defensive about it, because no one likes to feel like they've got an advantage.
No, and I fully get, you know, if you're a young lad who's grown up on a council estate and, you know, hasn't had a great school life, hasn't had a great family life, and someone's trying to tell you that you're privileged as a white male, like, I get it. But what we're saying is, you being male hasn't made that harder. And it's the same for race.
I was going to say is sometimes I remember seeing a quote once that said, like, I understand that I won't understand.
Yeah.
And I think as well, like, people do get on the defensive with it, because I know I don't do it as much anymore. But when I did used to kind of talk more about like feminist kind of topics on my social media, whenever I'm always open to a conversation, but sometimes people would class a conversation as, I'm just going to tell you how you're wrong.
Yeah.
And that's not, I saw a clip of this actually the other day that was so good. And it was, I'm probably not going to do it justice, but it was basically saying how you can disagree with somebody, but you shouldn't disrespect them.
Yeah.
And I think that's like the fine line of it, as in I saw a thing, actually, sorry, I watched so many podcasts, and it was this woman, and all of the people on the podcast, it was a mixture of like white men and men of colour, and all sat around a table, and she was saying how she can understand male privilege better than a man can, and this man was saying, absolutely not, like, I'm a man, I'll probably understand that better. And the man who was saying this was black, and she said, but do you not think you will understand white privilege more than a white man? Because the people that don't have the privilege understand more what it's like to not have it than those that have it.
Yeah, because I think you take it for granted.
Yeah, and you don't realise you've got it. The same way as us as white women will have a privilege.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
things like that. So,
well, when we had a big chat about, it's called the Rose Review, this report that looked at investment into females, and we did like a big presentation on it. And this poor female founder came over to me at the end of it, and she was like, so I'm a female trying to raise money, so I get 1% at the time of that money raised, but then actually I'm black, so my ability to raise that money again is like halved.
Yeah.
Because if you're female, not white, not Oxbridge educated, you know, the economic privilege is a huge thing, especially at this end of the market as well, because you've got people who, you know, they can raise £1 million of investment by going and speaking to the family and the friends.
That's insane.
Yeah.
Isn't it? Like, you don't, it's almost like a completely different world, because I don't think I could raise £1 million if I was, if this podcast got 1 million views, like, and it's insane that, like, I'll just go and ask mummy and daddy's friends, kind of thing. So that it's like a really complex subject, really privilege, isn't it? So what would you say, what actions are people trying to take then for the investment gap?
So I think in the investment community, again, that traditionally has been really male dominated. You know, if you look at most boards, it's old white males. They've all been to private schools. They've all been to super good universities, but that is starting to change. And one of the things that I really enjoy about my job at the minute is going out, meeting these investors, but actually finding the women in those investment houses and having the conversations with them. So you are seeing a lot more now that there's females in the investment team, because, you know, if you look at studies, female-led businesses outperform. They are more likely to succeed. They will deliver better returns. They're safer investments. So why wouldn't you want to invest? But then actually, if you as a female who's come into the table to have these conversations and say, I want £5 million off you to help grow my business, and you're sat there looking at 3 old white men, are they going to get you in the same way? Like, there's going to be a little bit of a disconnect there, and investors are recognising that, and they're trying to bring up women and have them around the table, so that, you know, it's unconscious bias, it's human nature. We like what we can see. And like one of the kind of areas in the UK at the minute that's really hot is like femtech and fem health. So things like natural cycles as an example. So technology that can help empower women or solely addresses women's health, so things like around the menopause and stuff.
Yeah.
Men don't get it as much.
Well, I was going to say, there's obviously that video that goes around and someone's made it into a song where NASA, who are meant to be like the greatest minds of the world, took a woman to up into space
mission, wasn't it?
And it was for 6 days, and they give her 100 tampons and asked, will that be enough?
I mean, best intentions.
I mean, you know,
they tried.
They've got the luxury tax, haven't they, on women's products, so I'd be keeping them.
Yeah.
But that, I think it's the lack of understanding, isn't it?
Yeah.
Of what each other go through.
I think it's even just, you know, women and men present things differently. They might react to questions differently. They might have different, you know, it's that diversity of thought, and actually having that diversity in your investment team will just make you make better decisions.
I completely agree, because sometimes, like, another reason why I stopped posting a lot on my Instagram was because I felt like initially kind of people is an easy option. Say, oh, she hates men. And it's not about that at all. You just want a fair playing field, and fair means fair. And men bring a lot of stuff to the table because they are quite, I don't want to use the word impulsive because that sounds like a negative, but as in
they're less
women
risk averse.
Yeah, because, and studies have shown that, because I was reading a book called The Confidence Code where they did studies. Have you read that as well?
I love that
and
book.
They do studies, don't they, in like, I don't know if it was American Sports University or an American Business University, because they did studies on both, where if a woman isn't qualified, she wouldn't even think of applying for the job, whereas a man would think, yeah, I'll give it a go.
Once they get to like 80-90% of the requirements.
Yeah, whereas a woman won't do anything until she feels more than 100% qualified, whereas a man's more likely to take that risk. So realistically, you probably, on a terms of like a board, like when you're talking about investments, you want a good balance, because you'd balance each other out in decision making.
Yeah, definitely.
Because I always remember once, and this is me getting a little bit hokey pokey, but I am a bit of a hokey pokey gal. I saw a psychic, and she told, I've seen many psychics. I went through a phase.
I did
I'm
not
seeing
know
a psychic
this
next
about
week.
you.
Oh my God, yeah, I'm seeing a psychic next week as well. And what she told me, I feel like I've just hit you with like statistics and facts, and now I'm like, I saw a psychic.
My psychic says.
Yeah. And she told me that in a past life, I've been a man in several past lives.
Ooh, interesting.
And she said that I need to channel that more when I'm making decisions for my business and stuff like that. And I think
I love that.
Well,
I can actually. Well, you were a bit of a tomboy when
I
you were
was
young.
I was a bit of a man growing up, wasn't I?
Remember poor Dawn crying that you wouldn't play with dolls.
I know. Or where my mum used to have to bribe me with chocolate to wear a dress, and that she'd be like, "You can put your footy kit when you get back in, but we're going the house to put on a dress." No, yeah. So I think that like I definitely try and channel that in more, because especially with, I'd done a mentorship years ago. It was maybe it was just as lockdown came in, and it was, her name's Jocelyn. She's amazing. And she spoke about the difference between how we write emails as women.
Yeah.
And whenever I write messages now,
niceties.
Yeah, I'm just constantly apologising. Like, I'm so sorry I'm messaging you. I'm
so
such an inconvenience. Yeah, and
if it's not too much trouble, please could you maybe, if you get a chance, look at this for me.
You're already setting that tone of that. It's almost like you don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
But it's because we want to come across as nice and not blunt.
Yeah, the
whereas
email
it needs to be more decisive.
So funny.
Yeah.
So I've got a really close group of girlfriends, and we worked with some really, really great guys who were lovely, like really lovely guys, would always like support us and blah blah blah. But we still say, what would they do? What would they ask for this? Like promotions, pay rises? Would they just gonna not ask for one? No, they're men. They're gonna ask.
I sometimes think, and obviously you can't throw all men into the same kind of bucket. I don't think anyone's ever said that phrase for. Throw them all in the same bucket. But I know a lot of my friends as well, we won't ask. And that's a huge thing. I would rather wait and be asked.
Yeah.
Because probably a bit of fear of rejection in there as well. But yeah, I just think that people will know when I'm ready.
Yeah, we don't want to get ideas above our station.
Yeah, that's so interesting.
That's something I've really had to challenge myself on over the last few years.
Because obviously, if you must have to be extremely. You're dealing with £300 million. No, you're saying it's the solicitors do. You can't afford to be kind of second guessing yourself.
Yeah.
So, because I was talking to you, we had like a really deep conversation before we done the podcast, and I said that like I've always admired you and how you're able to just. To me, you seem quite fearless, and that doesn't mean that you're not caring of people's feelings. But when you feel like you're facing an unjust or you're not being treated with enough respect, you will call it out there and then, and it's not necessarily being aggressive or being rude, and that's something I really struggle with. So how have you kind of built yourself up to be able to have the confidence to do that?
I think some of it is, you face those situations and you come away from them, you think, I wish I would have said something. And you do that thing, don't you, where you come away and you have that conversation in your head and you do the little bit. Yeah, you do like the little back and forth. And then I think I just got sick of having that argument with myself. And, if you do it in a respectful way, the classic one is you're in a meeting and you're talking and someone interrupts out of, they've got excited about something as well. And sorry, James, can I just finish my thought there for a second? And
fuck you, James.
I feel really bad because I've used James and I love James. James would never do that. But it's just, if you do it in a polite way, like you say, it doesn't have to be aggressive. And the first couple of times you do it, it is scary, but
it's like setting boundaries. So setting boundaries feels extremely uncomfortable.
Yeah. But there's that quote, isn't it, that says like no one thinks about you as much as you do. Like if you knew how little people thought of you, you'd be offended. Infrequent, and I think you build that up in your head as being something really good. And actually, if I did say that to James, he'd be like, "Oh, sorry, Chloe."
And one thing I've been working on and learning about recently is a lot of the things that we worry about are assumptions.
Yeah.
And if you really want to know, ask that person, and vice versa. If I said something in a meeting and I thought, oh, did I sound rude? I could always say at the end, I didn't mean to come across as rude then. I just wanted to get to the point. I had a good point to make and I didn't want to be interrupted.
Yeah.
And vice versa. There's nothing stopping people coming up. I thought you were a bit short with me before.
Yeah.
Like a lot of the time we build these things up and they're just assumptions. And
Yeah.
as they say, it makes an ass of you and me when you assume. Yeah, I find I could talk about stuff like that all day though, because I find it really interesting. But I do try and I also think there's a degree of fake it till you make it with confidence. Like sometimes I will fake it till I make it. If I need to be a bit authoritative or a bit ballsy, I'll just kind of channel like an alter ego almost. And then you just eventually will start to end up becoming second nature to you, really. No, I find all that really interesting. Because when we had the conversation, you mentioned about that there's a time and a place. Have you struggled with that, with your like authoritiveness?
Yeah, a little bit. I think, especially when you are doing something like setting a boundary or saying, actually, you said this and it made me feel this kind of way. I think as a woman, you're particularly conscious of not being seen as emotional, overreacting, sensitive.
Yeah.
And so I found, particularly when it's been quite a big thing that I've had to address, that actually coming away, having like the emotional rant to my friends about it and being like,
yeah,
what the hell? And then actually going back to them and saying, can we just have 5 minutes to talk about something?
Yeah.
And saying, look, this is a situation, this is what I said, this is how it's made me feel.
Yeah.
And doing it in like a really calm way. I think it actually makes you feel quite empowered as well. I know
Really?
I'm terrible. Like if I get angry, stressed, frustrated, like I cry. And you don't want to you don't want to go into those situations like and be like,
because then it does like it plays up to that.
Exactly, that stereotype.
I definitely do it when I get passionate about something.
Yeah.
I'm like, these are tears of pure anger.
Yeah. But equally, if there are times where I can still feel bubbled up, I will just say like, I might cry, but it's not because I'm sad.
It's not because of you.
It's not because of you. It's just that I actually like feel really strongly about this.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's hard. I think I've learned that actually some things have just let go because they're not going to change their view. It's not worth your headspace, or it wasn't said with malintent. Like certain things, just write them off. If it is something that's actually really bothered me, I don't tend to do it in a group setting. I tend to...
You see, I've had this conversation. I feel empowered in a group setting. I don't know why. I had this conversation with my friend because she was saying she feels the complete opposite. In a group setting, she'll feel really intimidated. I feel more intimidated one-on-one.
Oh, interesting.
I don't, honestly, could not tell you why, but I would feel, if we were like at a team meeting and something I didn't agree with, it's almost like I feed off the energy of others. And I'm like, I'm going to be the voice for these people, even if I don't know.
Well, so that's interesting. So I was just thinking, if I was in a meeting and something happened or got said about someone else, I'd have no qualms about addressing it then and there.
And I can really address it for other people.
Slighted me, that's when I'm a bit like, oh, I'll sit back and I'll think about this and I might go and speak to them afterwards. I think it's much harder to do for yourself.
100%. I can like easily defend somebody else. I won't even get anxious about it afterwards. No. Whereas if I've had to stand up for myself, I'm like, oh, I am the worst person ever. But on that note, just as like a nice one to finish off, what is the best advice you've ever been given and why?
So this is quite a hard one actually, because I've genuinely had so much good advice over the years. I think when I was starting off in my career, someone said to me, if you go to a meeting, you have to say something, you have to input, you have to make your presence known, you have to make your opinion known. Otherwise, you're just there to take notes and, you know, you've got good ideas. Why aren't you saying them?
Yeah.
And I would always be sat there, I'd think something, but I'd be like, oh, someone else is going to think of that in a second and say it. And if they don't, it's because it's wrong or it's not important. Like all these people in this room are so clever, like they'll sort it out. So I was told, like, you know, make yourself more present. And what they said to me was, get it out of the way early. Like, it doesn't have to be really profound, but, you know, if you go into a meeting, you've said hi, you're getting started, you know, just, it's the fear of opening your mouth and speaking. So, you know, if they're saying revenue for last month was £5,500,000, just open your mouth and say, sorry, was that 5.5? And then you've got it out of the way. It's not the fear of speaking, it's the fear of like doing that initial thing. So that was really good advice. And I don't think there's a meeting that I don't say anything in now. I think they're all like, can you shut the fuck up, please, Chloe?
Shock me. But it's good that, one last note on that as well, and I'm crediting the man behind the camera for this one. I can get really anxious about making points as well. But one thing that I remember now, because we have like meetings as coaches, is if I want to make a point and I can back it up with a why, I'll say it. If I don't have a why, maybe sit back until I know my why. And I think that helps. But like you say, but I'll definitely could use yours. Like, is it snatch we're doing today?
Because it's such an easy thing. Because once you've done that, you've made the eye contact, you've opened your mouth. People know what your voice sounds like now. It's just so much easier to then be like, whew, right, I've spoken now. I can relax.
No. Well, have you enjoyed it?
I've loved
being
it.
on. Not as scary as it thinks, is it?
No.
Well, thank you for coming on. And so this you should have watched this on YouTube now, or you've listened to it on Spotify. Forgot about the sound. So thank you for tuning in, guys. And as always, if you have any questions or anything you'd like to ask on this podcast or ones you've listened to before, drop me a message on Instagram at EllieishPT.